Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some cutting-edge AI research.
Always. Let's see what the ArcGIS preprint server has in store for us this week. January 23rd, 2025.
We've got a ton of papers to unpack, so let's not waste any time.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me was just how much research there is on diffusion models.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're really taking off.
For anyone who needs a quick refresher, can you give us the rundown on what diffusion models actually are?
Sure, imagine you take a photo and just slowly add digital noise to it until eventually it's just a complete blur.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So diffusion models basically work by learning to reverse that process.
So they start with noise and then work backwards to a clear image.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that they can be used to generate all sorts of data, not just images.
That's right. Like this paper here, score-based diffusion models in function space. They're talking about using diffusion models to generate things like solutions to equations
Wow, that's
or
wild.
even new 3D designs.
So it's not just about making pretty pictures anymore. It's like we're using AI to design actual objects or even solve complex problems.
Yeah, and then there's this other paper, treatment-aware diffusion probabilistic model, which is focused on simulating how brain tumors might grow under different
That's
treatments.
potentially huge for personalized medicine, right?
Absolutely. But of course, it also brings up a lot of ethical questions about the role of AI in healthcare, which actually we should probably come back to later.
Yeah, good point.
But first, I'm curious, with all of this amazing stuff AI can do, I'm also thinking about the computational costs.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Training and running these models takes a ton of resources.
So how are researchers trying to make AI more efficient?
Well, there are a lot of different approaches, but one really interesting one is to try to understand the math behind how these models learn.
Like in this paper, ODT convergence theory.
Right. If we can figure out how fast these models learn in theory, then we can design them to learn more efficiently in practice.
So less training data, less processing power.
Exactly. And then there are techniques like the one described in accelerate high-quality diffusion models, which uses something called inner loop feedback to speed up image generation.
I can see how that would be huge for creative industries, where time is money.
Absolutely. And then there's this other challenge. How do we even compare the size of different AI models?
Because you can't just count the number of parameters, right?
Yeah,
Especially when some models have been pruned.
exactly. It's like decluttering your closet. You get rid of the stuff you don't need anymore to make it more efficient.
So how do you compare a pruned model to a non-pruned one?
Well, that's what this paper, The Journey Matters, is trying to address. It's like they're creating a universal translator for different AI species.
So we can understand their true capabilities.
Precisely.
So far, we've been talking about AI creating things, but it can also help us understand and improve the world around us.
Totally. Let's dive into some of the real-world applications that are being explored.
Perfect.
One area that caught my eye is anomaly detection.
Like in this paper, anomaly detection in double-entry bookkeeping data.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
using something called federated learning to spot financial irregularities.
And federated learning is interesting because it allows AI to learn from data that's spread across multiple sources without actually sharing that data directly.
Huge for privacy and security, right?
Definitely, especially in finance.
And then there's this other paper that I thought was really cool, attention-driven hierarchical reinforcement learning, which uses AI to find sources of things like gas leaks.
Or pollutants.
Yeah, it's like an AI bloodhound sniffing out hidden dangers.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about this paper, optimal sequential decision-making in geosteering?
So that one's all about optimizing drilling operations, which is a super complex process.
With very high stakes.
Definitely. And this AI can help make better decisions during drilling, minimizing risks, and maximizing resource extraction.
So we've seen AI that can create, optimize, analyze, and even help make life or death decisions. But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. We can't talk about all this amazing research without also talking about the ethical implications.
Exactly. And thankfully, researchers are starting to really grapple with these issues.
Like in this paper, an efficient framework for crediting data contributors. They're trying to figure out how to fairly compensate people whose data is used to train these AI models.
Which is a really tricky question when you think about it. Who owns the data that fuels these algorithms?
And how do we ensure that everyone benefits from AI's progress?
Those are questions we definitely need to be asking. And then there's this other paper, the Elevate AI LLMs Framework, which provides guidelines for evaluating the use of large language models in healthcare research.
It's all about making sure these tools are being used responsibly, transparently, and for the benefit of patients.
Which is crucial as AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at just a small slice of the incredible research happening in the world of AI.
I know, right? It's mind-blowing how quickly this field is advancing, and it makes you wonder what the future holds.
That's what we'll be exploring in part 2 of this deep dive.
So we've seen how researchers are pushing the boundaries of what AI can do, making it more powerful and efficient.
Right. And now I'm really interested to see how these advances are being applied in the real world.
Yeah, me too. And actually, one thing that I noticed going through these papers is this real focus on making AI understandable.
Even for people who aren't hardcore AI experts.
Exactly.
Because if we're going to trust AI with important decisions, we need to be able to understand how it's making those decisions.
Totally agree. And that's where this whole idea of explainable AI comes in.
So give us an example.
Okay, well, there's this paper, Towards Interpretable Radiology Report Generation via Concept Bottlenecks, using a multi-agentic RAG.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
I know, right? But basically, it's all about making AI-generated medical reports easier for doctors to understand.
So instead of just spitting out a diagnosis, the AI actually explains its reasoning.
Right, it's like showing its work.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And this emphasis on explainability goes way beyond healthcare. You see it in finance, too.
Oh yeah, like in that paper we talked about earlier, anomaly detection in double-entry bookkeeping data.
Exactly. The AI isn't just finding anomalies, it's also explaining why it thinks those anomalies are suspicious.
It's like an AI detective.
Exactly. It tells you who did it and how they did it.
Okay, so we've got explainable AI, but what about the ways humans and AI can actually work together?
Oh, yeah, that's a huge area of research right now, and there are some really exciting developments happening there.
Like what?
Well, for example, there's this paper on compositional instruction following with language models and reinforcement learning.
Okay, and what's that about?
So it's basically exploring how AI can learn to follow complex instructions.
By breaking them down into smaller steps.
Exactly. Just like you would if you were training a human.
So you could have an AI that can collaborate with humans on these really complex projects.
Like writing software or designing buildings.
It's really a whole new way of thinking about AI. It's not just about replacing humans, it's about augmenting our abilities.
Absolutely. And speaking of collaboration, another trend we're seeing is this huge push towards open source AI research.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that too. A lot of the papers we're looking at are based on open source projects.
Right. And that's really exciting because it means that anyone can contribute to the field. You don't need to be part of a big tech company or a university lab.
It's really democratizing AI.
Exactly. And it's leading to some incredible innovations. Like, for example, there's this project called Open Magvit T2, an open source project toward democratizing autoregressive visual generation.
Okay, that sounds cool.
It is. They're providing open source tools and pre-trained models for generating high-quality images.
So anyone can use it.
Yeah. Artists, designers, researchers, anyone.
That's awesome. And it's not just image generation either, right? There are open source projects popping up in all sorts of areas.
Totally. Natural language processing, robotics, even healthcare.
It's like the whole field of AI is becoming more open and collaborative.
And that's really exciting to see because it means that the pace of innovation is only going to accelerate.
Which brings us back to the ethical questions we were talking about earlier.
Because as AI gets more powerful and more widespread, the stakes get higher.
We need to be really careful about how we develop and deploy these technologies.
Definitely. And that's why it's so encouraging to see researchers engaging with these ethical questions. Like in this paper, the Elevate AI LLMs framework, which is all about providing guidelines for using large language models in healthcare.
Because we want to make sure AI is being used to benefit everyone.
Exactly. It's about shaping the future of AI to align with our values and aspirations.
And speaking of shaping the future, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some specific research areas that I think are really ripe for innovation.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start?
Well, one area that I'm really interested in is the development of more efficient AI models.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Because as these models get bigger and more complex, they require more and more data and processing power.
Which is not sustainable in the long run.
Definitely not. So we need to find ways to make these models leaner and meaner.
Like in this paper, The Journey Matters, which explores how to compare the size of different models, even if they've been pruned.
Right. And multi-scale training of convolutional neural networks, which introduces a faster and more robust approach to training CNNs.
I'm also really fascinated by the research that's trying to make AI more human-like in the way it learns and
Oh,
reasons.
yeah, me too. Like this paper on human-like conceptual representations emerge from language prediction.
They're showing how language models can actually develop these conceptual representations that are similar to what we see in the human brain,
It's like they're starting to think like us.
which is kind of freaky, but also super cool,
Totally. And then there's all the work happening in reinforcement learning.
which is basically teaching AI to learn through trial and error.
Right. And we're starting to see some really impressive results. Like in this paper, Kimi K 1.5, scaling reinforcement learning with LLMs, which shows how large language models can actually boost the performance of these algorithms.
Wow. So AI is getting better at learning from its mistakes.
Exactly. And that opens up a whole world of possibilities for solving complex problems in all sorts of different fields.
It's clear that AI is evolving at an incredible pace, and it's affecting every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to stay informed about these developments.
Because the future of AI is not something that's happening to us.
It's something we're all creating together.
So let's explore some of those more speculative but equally fascinating research directions that are emerging on the horizon.
So one area that I think is particularly mind-blowing is this idea of embodied AI.
Embodied AI.
Yeah, like AI systems that have physical bodies.
Whoa. So they can actually interact with the real world directly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine robots that can learn and adapt in real time, or self-driving cars that can navigate complex environments.
Or even like prosthetics that can respond to your thoughts.
It's like taking AI out of the computer and putting it into the real world.
I can see how that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
What else is on the horizon?
Well, another area that's super interesting is AI and creativity.
Oh yeah, like AI artists and musicians.
Exactly. Imagine AI that can compose music or paint pictures.
I mean, we're already seeing AI generate some pretty impressive stuff.
Right. But what happens when AI starts to create things that we humans couldn't even imagine?
That's a really interesting question. Like, what does it even mean for something to be creative if it's made by an algorithm?
Right. It really challenges our definitions of art and creativity. And then there's this whole other level of, whoa,
What's that?
what if AI starts to develop its own goals and motivations?
Okay, yeah, now we're getting into some serious science fiction territory.
I know, right? But
Mm.
it's a question that researchers are starting to think about.
Because if AI becomes truly autonomous, then we need to make sure that its goals align with ours.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to those ethical considerations we keep coming back to.
It's like the more powerful AI becomes, the more important it is that we use it wisely.
I couldn't agree more. We need to be thinking about these things now, before it's too late.
So what role do we want to play in shaping the future of AI?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's not just up to the scientists and the engineers, it's up to all of us.
Because the future of AI is not predetermined.
It's something we're creating every day.
With every choice we make, every investment we make, every conversation we have.
So let's make it a future that we can all be proud of.
I love that. A future where AI is used to benefit humanity.
To solve problems.
To make the world a better place.
To empower us, to augment our abilities, to expand our horizons.
That's the future I want to see.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI research.
It's been quite a journey.
We've seen some truly incredible advancements, from diffusion models that can create photorealistic images, to algorithms that can optimize complex systems.
But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the future of AI is not something to be feared,
It's something to be embraced,
but also something to be shaped.
responsibly, ethically, and with a clear vision for the kind of world we want to create.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
This is the deep dive.
Signing off.